is he? Can everyone please take a seat? Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rosalind Grinberg, and along with Narit Robin, who couldn't be here tonight, we want to welcome you as the Senior Rabbinic Co-Chairs of the Search. We're very excited tonight to welcome Rabbi Lebovitz and his wife, Blair. So, along with us, I wanted to just say that we are very grateful, first of all, for all of you who have come here tonight and for all the people that are on Zoom. Hello. We really appreciate the turnout and the support. We have an incredible team here, the administration and staff led by Matt Weintraub, which really pulled this off in all our other visits with really seamlessly, and we really appreciate all the work of the staff to make this happen and to make everything so lovely for everybody. I also want to recognize the executive board, who has been extremely supportive and confident in Narit and I in searching for this next rabbi, and to our amazing, amazing search committee. We have a search committee that is made up of a lot of really different individuals from different areas of our congregation. And we have an amazing group of people who have worked through cold weather in our backyard, through COVID numbers when they were high. We worked in my backyard, and we met on a dime when necessary, and everyone is very dedicated. So I'd like to recognize those search committee members right now. We have Donna Bender, Alan Feit, Nathan Fierer, Jeff Goss, Victor Cohen, Lisa Liner-Fagan, Megan Loffman, Jeff Levine, Rita Cinder, Melody Torbati, and of course my co-chair, Narit Robin. So, yes. So just to remind you, there were 6 areas that our committee identified that were the characteristics that we felt were most important for our search of our next senior rabbi. We're looking for a thought leader who is intellectually engaging, a relationship builder who's approachable, a visionary leader, someone who's spiritually engaging, a coalition and consensus builder, and a philanthropic leader. And we thought to ourselves, how are we ever going to find someone like that? But I'm really pleased to bring you an extraordinary candidate tonight, Rabbi Nolan Lebovitz, who we hope when you listen to him that you keep those characteristics that we're looking for in mind as you listen to his drash and the story that he'll tell you about his rabbinic journey. So now I'm going to go into his background. Rabbi Nolan Lebovitz is the senior rabbi at Adat Shalom, which is in Santa Monica. Since his arrival in 2015, Adat Shalom has flourished. He worked with the community, developing innovative children's activities and adult programs, providing meaningful services, and reestablishing the religious school. Rabbi Lebovitz did his undergrad work at the University of Southern California Cinema and Television School, and he received his rabbinic ordination from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies at American Jewish University. Prior to the rabbinate, and he'll talk more about his journey later, Rabbi Lebovitz enjoyed a 10-year career in the film industry. He was a writer, a producer, and director. Most notably, he wrote and directed the 2008 suspense thriller Tortured, and I'm sure you've all seen it. So merging his 2 passions of Torah and filmmaking, Lebovitz has produced 2 documentary films, Roadmap Genesis and Roadmap Jerusalem. Rabbi Lebovitz regularly contributes thought pieces and Torah commentary to the Jewish Journal and other publications. He also enjoys teaching, and for the last 6 years has taught a cohort of the Miller Introduction to Judaism course at AJU. Before moving to LA for college, he grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and is a lifelong Cubs fan. Rabbi Lebovitz is married to Blair, and together they raised 3 wonderful children, Shelby, Simon, and Maddie. and they're all Dodgers fans, I'm told. But their dog is named Wrigley. So I would like to introduce Rabbi Lebovitz to come up. He is going to teach a short teaching, and then we're going to open up to a Q&A with our president of almost 4 months left, Jeff Goss. So.
Thank you, Rosalind. I want to thank Nurit as well. She's watching from Ireland right now. And I want to thank the search committee and Jeff and the board of directors and the executive committee and all of the other members of all of the other 1,000 committees that I've met with so far. All of you, thank you, and especially to you who are taking time out of your busy Sunday evening to hear this teaching, this speech about my vision for synagogue life. I so look forward to taking your questions afterward and sitting in conversation with Jeff. One of my teachers who's had a tremendous influence on me was born in 1856 in Ukraine. At birth, he was given the name Asher Tzvi Ginsburg. He grew up to be one of the greatest Zionist voices of all time, a prophet, advocating for Jewish peoplehood and cultural Judaism. You'll probably know him better by his pseudonym, Achad Ha'am, which means one of the people. Achad Ha'am battled Theodor Herzl in every Zionist forum in which Hamilton-style rap battles occurred. They stood as two pillars in foundational Zionist thought. Achad Ha'am believed in cultural Zionism, while Herzl pushed a political Zionist agenda. In 1902, Achad Ha'am delivered a speech in Minsk, Russia, that was titled Spiritual Revival. In this context, spiritual did not mean prayer. In his brilliant speech, he essentially demands the revival of a national spirit. That national spirit includes education, literature, language, and art. I want to quote Achad Ha'am. Once the Jewish people recognize the truth of a particular conception and makes it a basis of action, we give ourselves wholly to it. In other words, we, the Jewish people, when we put our minds to it, we get the job done. I'm incredibly optimistic about the value of synagogue life. I'm particularly confident in the future of this synagogue, Valley Beth Shalom. It has so much to offer, and it will have so much to offer. And at the same time, synagogue life, in general, is in need of a spiritual revival. Judaism is a duality of existence. We're an ancient homeland and a rich diaspora. We're a kind of religion and a kind of people. Jewish rabbinic philosophy can be framed between Maimonides and Yehuda Halevi. Zionism can be explored between Herzl and Achad Ha'am. Shabbat can be learned between Shamor and Zachor. There's always a beautiful tension in Judaism. We stand now between two great holidays in Purim and Pesach. I'll be reflecting on some texts tonight from Purim and Pesach to frame this conversation. In addition, in considering synagogue life, we have to consider two cathedrals of spiritual meaning for me. First, we can discuss the Kotel, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. And second, we'll look at Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. The Kotel is a relic filled with meaning and spirituality. Of all the remaining supporting walls of the Second Temple Mount, the Western Wall, the Kotel, stood closest to our holiest place, the Kodesh HaKodeshim. It represents our eternal tradition, everything from the past we want to make sure that we keep. This institution, the synagogue, is not meant to be Starbucks or Peloton or Tesla or anything about which you are passionate about in your daily lives out there. It's supposed to look and feel different. Judaism, beginning with our worship in the desert, continuing in our building of the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem, culminating in our rabbinic continuance of the tradition after the temple's destruction, has always run counter to popular, dominant, modern sensibility. The Egyptians were modern. Then the Babylonians were modern. Then the Romans. Now American culture is all the rage. These ideas reflect but a sand in time. Yiddishkeit remains eternal. Words like digital, efficient, artificial are all signposts of modern American culture. We get what we want, when we want, how we want. We think of it as progress. And that's fine for secular culture out there. But in here, in synagogue life, there should be a different cultural rubric. Ideals such as relationship, peoplehood, wisdom, mitzvot, godliness, supporting Israel, must remain our guiding principles. We have to maintain Jewish standards and keep the kind of strong connection with our past that resonates with us in our kishkis. While the rest of the world sells the newest and latest, we have to value the ancient. While they market material possession, we have to advocate wisdom. While they tweet, we have to study long, complex texts that speak of our relationship with the Almighty. While they gather thousands of virtual friends, we have to hold on to each other in person. We stand here today in such a special place in the Jewish calendar between two incredible holidays of Purim and Pesach, as I mentioned before. I'd argue that Passover is our most ancient biblical holiday, while Purim is actually the last biblical holiday. According to the Torah, the month of Nisan, the month of Pesach, is the first on our Jewish calendar, our spiritual calendar, and the month of Adar is the last on our Hebrew calendar. Beginning in the Torah, before we even are freed from Egypt, Exodus chapter 12 begins by explaining to us a new calendar. While the entire world bowed down to concrete statues, we were commanded to believe in the abstract notion of sacred time. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim. God spoke to Moses and Aaron while still in Egypt. HaChodesh hazeh lechem rosh chodashim. This month of Nisan shall mark for you the beginning of the months. While the Jewish people was intensely focused on our exodus from Egypt, where we were going, and believe you me, we were worried about what we were going to eat. God wanted us to focus on something different. For us, time is sacred. The way we use our time matters. We're meant to preserve this countercultural idea. It's still countercultural to say that no matter what is happening in each of our busy lives, on Friday night, we stand together as a family. We light Shabbat candles. We say Kiddush. We eat together. We spend time together. Time is one of our foundational walls. Family time matters. Community time matters. Purim is the only holiday that centers around the reading of a book of the Tanakh, Megillat Esther. Sure, we read other Megillot on other holidays, but it's not the central mitzvah. Nobody would argue that we celebrate Shavuot in order to read the book of Ruth, as beautiful as that book is. Tisha B'Av and Eicha come awfully close. We commemorate Tisha B'Av to mourn, but Eicha is but an instrument of our mourning. We're commanded in chapter 9 of Esther to read the book of Esther. These days are recalled and observed in every generation, by every family, every province, every city, and these days of Purim shall never cease among the Jewish people. Esther Hamalka et kol tokef lekayem et igeret hapurim hazot. Then Queen Esther wrote a second letter of Purim for the purpose of confirming the holiday with full authority. There's a tradition that when we say igeret hapurim hazot, we still lift up the letter. We lift the Megillah in the air to show our adherence to this tradition. In a digital world of ones and twos, we still hold up the parchment scroll because we are a people of words and ideas, and that will never change. The world out there and the world in here are seemingly the farthest they've ever been from one another in terms of expectation, and it's exactly that reason why I'm so optimistic about the value of synagogue life moving forward. My earliest memory of synagogue life at Bethel in Highland Park, Illinois, was my family selling our chametz. As a child, my parents used to bring me into the rabbi's office. I remember it as a dark and mysterious place, something out of a Chaim Potok novel, and there waited for us Bill Lebo. Rabbi Lebo was always smiling, always friendly. and he'd ask me to hold on to his pen as the instrument for transferring the chametz. That ceremony, that rabbi, was like nothing that I encountered in the outside world. Rabbi Lebo's successor, Rabbi Vernon Kurtz, who bar mitzvahed me and had a great rabbinic influence on me, Rabbi Kurtz called my parents a year before my bar mitzvah and told them that it was time for our family, who had never been to Israel before, it was time for us to join his trip to Israel for first-timers. Nobody ever told my parents where they were supposed to take a vacation. And you know what? They listened. We went. And that trip changed our lives. Sometimes a rabbi has to call you to action. In Rabbi Feinstein's book, In Pursuit of Godliness and a Living Judaism, about Rabbi Schulweis, Rabbi Feinstein wrote that the heart of Rabbi Schulweis's religious faith is a belief in the ever-expanding horizon of the human moral self. Rabbi Schulweis and Rabbi Feinstein have called on us to believe better, to learn better, and we have. A rabbi can set an expectation of behavior for a synagogue, and the community can adopt values and principles that would otherwise be lost or forgotten. 4 years ago, my wife and I, we took our children to Israel. Coincidentally, my brother-in-law's family came to Israel at the same time on a large tour bus group for his oldest son's bar mitzvah. So we met their family at Ein Gedi to be there for the bar mitzvah on top of Masada at sunrise. It was only like 105 degrees at sunrise. It was not a very religious service. Of course, the kids in the ceremony all had beautiful, brand new, glistening talitot. Only 3 adults wore talises: the tour guide, one other dad, and me. And there I am, the weird uncle rabbi, off to the side, who starts putting on my tefillin for this weekday service. In this group setting, that meant that I had lost my mind. So I sat and prayed on top of Masada, alone, cast aside, davening the Ashrei in the corner. And I lost myself in prayer, Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, blessed are they who dwell in your house. And suddenly my mind wanders through God's house, and I realize the history of the place in which I'm sitting. I see the beauty of creation, the landscape of our Negev, Herod's creation of this palace, the Jewish resistance against the Romans, the unthinkable act of defiance that took place there, the rediscovery of a national treasure in our national homeland, and finally the IDF oath that occurs on top of Masada today, that Masada will never fall again. My mind tries to grasp the enormous weight, the responsibility that sits on our shoulders, to own our history, to protect our lineage, to create a link in the chain that's strong and worthwhile. And then the most gentle hand runs down the leather strap of my arm. And I look over, and it's my son, 6 years old. He's watched me put on tefillin every morning of his entire life. And suddenly, in that place, he takes the extra leather that hangs off my hand, and for the first time, he wraps it around his own 6-year-old arm. And I look at my tefillin, my personal housing of the Torah that I wrap around my arm and my head each morning, is now wrapped around my arm and my son's arm together. My role as your rabbi is to hold out my tefillin strap for all of you to grab onto when you're ready and when you're inspired. Hold it out for you each day, each moment of possibility. The synagogue needs to provide opportunities to connect with our tradition, as many points of connection as possible. We have to offer opportunities to daven together, learn text together, cook our Jewish cuisine together, dance our Israeli dance together. And we can't rely anymore on Jews coming to synagogue because it's good for them. Think about how many places you visit anymore that are good for you. The dentist? Maybe. I apologize in advance if there are any dentists here in the talk. Is there anywhere else you go in the world just because it's good for you anymore? Synagogue should be meaningful, enriching, and fun. Every time we walk in, we should be welcomed, and every time we leave, we should be glad. We should be proud that we came. On the other hand, nobody has ever said with dread It's my annual appointment at Disneyland. So I guess I have to go. Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland symbolizes a timeless sense of creativity, imagination, and fun. Our kids count down the days to our next Disney trip. I count down the days to our next Disney trip. Disney is never afraid of reevaluating and reimagining its own greatest hits. The Pirates of the Caribbean ride today is not the same as it was when I was a child. Neither is Small World. Do you want to know why? Because the world has changed. Valley Beth Shalom is located in the greatest Jewish city in the entire diaspora, Los Angeles, which also happens to be the most creative city in the entire world. This synagogue should be a hub of creativity and innovation. The synagogue should be a creative think tank, an incubator for Jewish creatives. We should constantly be welcoming Jewish thought leaders, Jewish authors, Jewish filmmakers, Jewish singers, Jewish artists, Jewish chefs, and Jewish athletes. Jewish creatives should aspire to receive an invitation to VBS, to present their latest innovative ideas, experiences, or performances. This will be the West Coast Jewish version of the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan. Our services should be more engaging and more fun, more musical and more meaningful. Our teachers should be more varied, from rabbis who teach Talmudic text to Jewish entrepreneurs who teach tech. And our communal experiences need to transcend these walls. We need to take trips together, explore American Jewish history across this country together. We should hold different Shabbaton experiences off-site during the year. We can offer B'nai Mitzvah the opportunity to join us and celebrate their Simcha in Israel while still part of this community together. Our learning needs to transcend these walls. We need to use technology to create YouTube videos and podcasts so that a person can learn with VBS and be inspired by our Torah from the morning they wake up and reach for their phones to the time that they sit on the 405 in traffic to bedtime. This is the way in which we take the depth and the breadth of our tradition and make it come alive anew. Small World is not exactly the same, but Disney managed to reimagine it and keep its goodness. We can do the exact same thing for synagogue life. This past year, a congregant of mine, a favorite congregant of mine, whose body is riddled with cancer, she came into my office and she said to me that before she closes her eyes for the last time, she'd love to read out of the Torah just once. And of all of the Shabbatot, she chose our community Shabbaton at Brandeis Bardeen. Sure enough, I worked with her for weeks. And when the time came, she chanted 3 sentences of the Torah. Her entire family came to that Shabbaton and celebrated her. Our entire community sat there and wept. That afternoon, her entire family took a walk together. For whatever reason, she chose that venue. Perhaps because it's less formal, it's less intimidating than the sanctuary. Or perhaps her children and grandchildren would think of it like a mini vacation together. Or perhaps as she began a long transition toward the end of life, the idea of Torah and the idea of nature seemed closer than ever before. I don't know what she discussed with her family on that walk, but I know that that Shabbaton made that context, that framework possible for her family. Facilitating intimate moments of all different kinds in your lives and in the lives of your family, that's why I became a rabbi. My last point about Disneyland Torah. The Disneyland experience doesn't begin at the line for a ride. It doesn't even begin at the gates of the park. The experience begins when you enter the parking lot and pay for parking with a smile on your face. Synagogues have to do a better job welcoming others. Whether it's your first time at VBS or your 1,000th, you deserve to be welcomed like we've been waiting for you to show up. When I travel around the country with my documentaries, I speak at large evangelical churches. I always found greeters before I met security. I always had an opportunity to get coffee or nosh before entering their sanctuary. This is Ron Wolfson 101. Of course, I understand the need I actually advocate for synagogue security. But come on, a church should never outnosh us. Think about what it means when somebody offers you coffee or a cold drink, a muffin or mandelbread. It means that we want you to stay. In Hebrew, the words for synagogue is Beit Knesset, or a gathering place. It's not just a davening place. It's not just a place of learning. A synagogue is a place where Jews feel welcome. I'd suggest that a synagogue should be a place where all Jews feel welcome. All Jews mean Jews of all abilities. All Jews means privileged Jews and less privileged Jews, educated Jews and less educated Jews, Democratic Jews and Republican Jews. We have never been a monolithic people that's believed one thing, spoken with one voice, or marched to the beat of a single drummer. We are not a people of short meetings. We like to talk and debate. And in here, we have to teach an expectation of Ahavat Yisrael, of loving our fellow Jew, whether it be our family in Israel, or our family in Ukraine, or our family in Los Angeles, or our family in this building. That is an expectation that we can espouse to the entire Jewish world today, that it begins with us because it's desperately needed out there. What unites us has to be greater than what divides us. God did not only reveal God's self at Sinai to those with whom God agreed. And the shelter and support of this institution of Valley Beth Shalom must support Jews on every journey. We can help establish that as an expectation because we can. We can enjoy that privilege. We can bear that responsibility. What motivates people out there is self. What must motivate people in here is selflessness. There are prevailers of the Shoah that live here in Los Angeles who require financial assistance from Jewish Family Services. There are homeless Jews here in Los Angeles. There are Jewish veterans. There are Israelis who come visit LA after the military service and need housing and work and a sense of direction in their lives. There are so many Jewish people and others who need our help. With so many divisions within the Jewish world, imagine a community that's defined by its humanity, by our love, that we put our arms around Jews who need our help because nobody else does, because we are the place that wants to. And a synagogue is a place where Ahavat Yisrael must be displayed by actually loving the state of Israel. Israel is not politics. Loving Israel is like loving our family home. It's like loving this building. None of us are politicians, and none of us are military tacticians. There are many ways in which we can show our love and support for Israel without getting close to any sense of politics or the conflict. At Adat Shalom, we adopted Leket as our Israel Social Action Project. Leket is Israel's national food bank. We had the CEO of Leket speak to our congregation. We donated approximately $20,000 over 3 years to help feed Jews and Arabs, troubled youth, and Shoah prevailers. We were planning to volunteer there for a day in their food distribution center near Tel Aviv, but COVID canceled our trip. Over the 3 years in which we supported Leket, I never received a single complaint about politics when it came to Leket, and no complaints in synagogue life. That is a nes gadol. There are many Lekets. There are other opportunities for us. This is not the first time we've had to balance tradition and change. Consider for a moment these two great holidays surrounding us now. Each year on Pesach, we read the same Haggadah. You know, the one that Moses received on Sinai from Maxwell House. The same words. Every year, the same words. The first page of any Haggadah includes the order Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. First, we recite the Kiddush, then we wash our hands, then we eat a vegetable, we break the matzah, and so on and so on. The order never changes. The same process each year. Yet we're also commanded in the Talmud, in Tractate Psachim, and in the Haggadah itself, in every generation, one must look upon himself or herself as if he or she is the one who left Egypt. We're obligated to make Passover, Seder, meaningful and relatable for ourselves in our home. That means that when my parents read the 10 plagues, they ask my kids to put on sunglasses during darkness, and they throw marshmallows for hail, and they throw gummy bears for wild beasts, and it gets very messy. Things get knocked over. Grape juice spills all over, and it's delicious and it's fun. Do we recite the vast majority of the Haggadah? Absolutely. Is it the same Passover Seder that my grandfather observed in the Carpathian Mountains 100 years ago? Absolutely not. Does it maintain the integrity of our tradition? Should Passover be a night that's a mix of tradition and fun? You know the answer. The Talmud recalls two messages that Queen Esther sent the rabbis in Tractate Megillah. Esther was supposed to live hundreds of years before there were any rabbis, but I think it makes the story only more beautiful. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Shalcha lahem Esther lechachamim kiv'uni lidorot. The first word, keva. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda said, Esther sent to the sages a message, establish me for the generations. That word keva, kiv'uni lidorot, that word keva means to affix or to set or to establish. We use it in the blessing when we affix our mezuzah, likboa mezuzah. Keva means the set prayer structure. It's all the Jewish stuff we want to keep in place for the generations. Kiv'uni lidorot. And only a few lines later on the same page of Talmud, another version of the message recalls, Shalchala Esther lechachamim kitvuni lidorot. Esther sent to the sages a message, write me for the generations. And since Megillah Esther was presumably already written, we can only assume that this means continue to write me. Continue to tell my story for each generation. Make my story applicable, relatable to generation after generation. It's the same message. It's the same balance found in Purim and Pesach. The integrity has to remain the same. The experience has to be reimagined, reinvigorated with new life for each new generation. I'll close with a story about sacred synagogue life that took place in Disneyland for me. Before my third year at Ziegler, when my family moved to Jerusalem so that I could study, my oldest daughter was 4, and my son was 2, and my youngest wasn't born yet. My wife and I told my kids the best stories about Israel. We told them about the beaches and about the adventures, camels, mountains, surfing, bedtime stories about King David and Solomon's temple. The kids were so excited. This went on for months, and my wife and I, we thought we were geniuses. Then the week before we left for Israel, my parents took us to Disneyland for one last trip. And right next to Sleeping Beauty's castle, there's a princess pavilion where families wait in extraordinarily long lines so their kids can have the opportunity to meet a princess. And my daughter Shelby's favorite princess is Aurora, Sleeping Beauty. But there's no guarantee when you're waiting in the long line which princesses are going to be found inside. We're finally let inside. We meet Snow White. We chat. We take a picture. We meet Ariel, the mermaid. We chat. She takes a picture. We can see the dread on my daughter's face because we don't know who's behind door number 3. Sure enough, we turn the corner, and there she is, Aurora, in her sparkly pink gown. Shelby runs over and gives her the biggest hug. I walk over behind and I take a picture. We chat. It's good to see you, Aurora. Then just as we're about to walk away, my 4-year-old daughter says to Aurora, I'm going to have to say goodbye for a long, long time to you, Aurora. I'm moving away, and I'm going to miss you very much. All of the bedtimes, all the dinner conversations, she never said anything like this before to me or my wife. But to Aurora, she bears her soul. And what does she ask Aurora? She asks her, Kiv'uni lidorot. Aurora, remember me. Then Aurora asks, in her Disney princess voice, wow, where are you moving? and shall be answered to Israel. And Aurora gasped and covered her mouth. And my heart stood absolutely still. All of the talks and intense Zionism could have been undone in an instant by whatever Aurora is about to say next. I feared the worst. I dreaded a BDS Aurora, an anti-Semitic Aurora. Who is this person standing in front of me in this pink dress? But Aurora said, Israel is one of the most magical places. I love Israel. You're so lucky. Don't worry. We'll see each other again soon. To this day, I don't know if that Aurora was a malach, an angel sent by God, or if that Aurora was actually the face of the Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed here on earth. Nonetheless, Shelby hugged Aurora and walked out of that princess pavilion a proud Zionist. When our kids grow up, when we encounter transitions in life, this synagogue should be the place we come to tell the rabbi how much we're going to miss it. This place should be the castle in your heart, in your soul, in which you speak your most personal thoughts to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this place should help guide you along your own personal journeys in life, encourage you to write your own stories, kidvuni lidorot. There's value in a synagogue. But this place, Valley Beth Shalom, this place should be more than a synagogue. This place should be a castle of Yiddishkeit. Like Solomon's Temple and Herod's Masada, it should be an inspiration. We should inspire a sense of the past and our tradition, and like Sleeping Beauties, it should inspire a sense of dream and wonder. I think synagogue should be a place of dreaming. I think that's what Rabbi Schulweis intended, and I think it's what Rabbi Feinstein has fostered over their 10 years. We dream about our collective past, our personal journeys, our Jewish family, the world around us, and the divine will. It's what we do on Purim. It's what we do on Passover. It's what we should do every day of our lives. Let's pray together that our Jewish tradition, that synagogue life, inspires us to dream for generations to come. And let us say, Amen. Yeah. Hello?
Thank you for that extraordinary drosh. We appreciate it. I have no questions about Disneyland, and you have answered about 8 of the 10 questions I have tonight, so let's see what we can do. And I am not going to start this question period about USC, UCLA, because I think we're the only 2 USC alums in this whole room, but I'm very proud to say that I'm a USC alum, so welcome to our home. Oh, it's hard to hear me? I think my daughter will disagree with you, but this is just not working. So anyway, okay, I'll start with the hardest question first. Sure. Blair and your kids are Dodger fans.
Blair's not a Dodger fan. My kids are Dodger fans.
How in the world did you get away with naming your dog Wrigley?
That's right. It's a funny story, actually. Our family is the only family in the world that went to New York City on vacation and came home with a puppy. So if you ever go to New York on vacation, my kids will say, make sure you get a dog, because that's what they think is normal. So we got our dog from Amish country, Pennsylvania, and we had a vote at La Marais Steakhouse on 46th Street, or whatever it is, before we went to see The Lion King as a family. And everybody voted, and my wife and I voted for Wrigley, and somehow we won the election. The kids will talk about it even today. They didn't vote for Wrigley, but my wife wanted the name Wrigley for our puppy for a long time.
Probably the last thing you ever wanted was a vote in their house. You briefly touched on it, and Rosalind also briefly touched on it, but tell us about your rabbinic journey. Who are your teachers? What inspired you, and how did you become a pulpit rabbi?
So before I begin my rabbinic journey, one welcome and thank you that I didn't say because he wasn't in the room at that moment, but I want to thank Rabbi Feinstein for being here in the room this evening and supporting me through this process. My rabbinic journey began, like all rabbinic journeys do, at USC Film School. It actually began before that. I'm a grandchild of four prevailers of the Shoah, and that I was raised in a Jewish preschool and then Jewish day school, not too different than the one that you have here, Solomon Schechter in Chicago. And I came out here to go to USC. Before that, I grew up traditional, let's just say. My dad was not as religious. My mom was very religious. We ended up in a conservative synagogue because that was in the middle. And we ended up as part of Bethel, that I said. And I was sent to camp in Israel growing up all throughout the summer. So, while in Chicago there was a hard and fast curfew and we weren't allowed to go to these areas or those areas, we'd call my parents 4 o'clock in the morning from Tel Aviv to say, we're having the best time. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. We're on the beach with a bunch of strangers we just met 2 hours ago. My parents would say, have the best time with Jewish people. Just go and have fun in Israel. So Israel was like an amusement park growing up for us each and every summer. And I decided that I wanted to go into filmmaking, so I came out here to go to USC Film School, where I derived my Yiddishkeit for 4 years from the AEPI fraternity house, which is a dangerous place to derive Yiddishkeit from, but I think actually gave, Rabbi Brad Artson doesn't like me saying this, I derived just as many skills in terms of my rabbinate from that house, being the rush chair and welcoming people into the house, as I did in Talmud class for so long. And I went into the film industry. And it went reasonably well. Sony released a film of mine that I wrote and directed. We sold a television show. My wife and I got married during this time. We had our oldest daughter. And there was a kind of a moment of clarity where my agent told me to think of an elevated version of The Ring. I don't know how many people have seen The Ring movie, but it's very scary. And actually, it's very elevated, so there's not much to elevate about it. And I was holding my daughter in my hands. She was, I don't know, maybe a few months old. I remember watching the movie and covering her ears because I had hoped that nothing that was happening on screen would somehow infect her pure neshama at that point. And so I thought to myself, what kind of life is this where I don't even want my kids to be around what it is that I do? And I was at Factor's Deli at a business lunch. And I came out and I was standing in the valet line, which is like a ritual in Hollywood. Everybody stands in the valet, and then you know how important somebody is depending on what the car comes up when they. And next to Factor's Deli during the wait is the mitzvah store. And I walked into the mitzvah store, and thank God Rabbi Kraft was standing there behind the counter. And I said to Rabbi Kraft, I've read philosophy and self-help and all these things at Barnes & Noble at the Grove. What should I be reading? And he said to me like I was an absolute, complete idiot, you should read the Chumash. Everything you need to know in life is in the Chumash. And I thought to myself, I can do that. I know how to read the Chumash. So I went home and I started reading the cycle. And that week was Parshat Lech Lecha. And it was a parsha that I was forced to memorize and recite as a second grader in Solomon Schechter Day School. I was forced to stand in front of the class and say, Lech lecha me'artzecha mimoladecha mibeir avicha el ha'eretz asher ar'eka. I would go through the entire thing, and it meant nothing to me. And as an adult, I don't know, as a 28-year-old, when I opened the Chumash, I read about Abraham's journey, and it resonated in my soul as a man, as a husband, as a father, as somebody who is on a journey looking for answers, somebody who doesn't know their destination, trying to do their best. So I went back to the mitzvah store, and I said to him, what should I be reading now? And like a complete no-brainer, he says, now you read Rashi. And I had no idea what Rashi was saying. I started reading Rashi, and I had no idea what Rashi was saying. So I went back, and I said, I don't understand this, and the other. I think I should just get the Talmud. And he says, I think you need a teacher. You need to learn this stuff in a more formal setting. And so one morning, I built up the courage, and I said to my wife, I think I need to go to rabbinical school to start learning. I didn't say to become a rabbi. I said to start learning. And even though she's wearing a mask right now, I have no doubt she's making the same face that she made at that time. She married a filmmaker and she got a rabbi. And I went to rabbinical school, and I didn't get a lot of answers, but I got lots and lots of questions. And I loved it. I loved it. And so I went to rabbinical school 4 days a week, and on the Friday, which is the schedule of Ziegler, on Friday I'd go out to meetings in the industry, but I was in the closet of what I was doing the previous 4 days. I wouldn't tell anybody. And then one day I went to a meeting that I had waited a year to go to. I don't know, the person could be a member here at VBS, I'm not sure. It was very powerful in the entertainment industry. And I was waiting for this meeting, and I was going to pitch an idea for a movie. And I sat down, and he was, barely paying attention to me. He was at his computer answering emails, and he said to me, what do you got for me? It's good to meet you, blah, blah, blah. What do you got? And I said, I have an idea, and this, that, and the other. And he said, tell me something new. Tell me something that would surprise me. And I said to him, well, 4 days a week, I studied Talmud and Jewish philosophy at a rabbinical school at American Jewish University. And he turned around, he slumped in his chair, and he said, I could have been such a good Jew. I did so well in my bar mitzvah. And then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then it became an hour of pastoral care. I never got a chance to pitch what I wanted to pitch, and I realized that if I was going to study at Ziegler, if I was going to be a rabbi, I had to be a rabbi all the way through. Being a rabbi is a different type of job. You're never not a rabbi. And when you meet Jews, wherever you are as a rabbi, it is an opportunity for them to create relationship with you, to try to reach out for the Masorah, for the tradition, in whatever way they can. And so I finished Ziegler, went to Israel, came back, had amazing teachers along the way, Rabbi Artson, Rabbi Feigelson, Rabbi Peretz, Rabbi Feinstein, amazing teachers, and many of them I became friends with. And in my last year, during rabbinical school, my first 4 years, I interned at Sinai Temple, and I worked for Rabbi Wolpe, and got to know him, and Rabbi Guzik. And then in my last year, I took over Adat Shalom as the student rabbi, but there was nobody supervising me on the campus. Once a month, I would sit down and talk with Rabbi Artson about Adat Shalom, and he would share with me his experiences at Mission Viejo, at the synagogue that he was at. And it was an incredible opportunity for us to become friends, to segue out of student-teacher more to mentor-mentee friends, and learn from him in terms of what he did in building a smaller congregation into a thriving, vibrant synagogue, congregation. I've said the word congregation, 1,000 times today. And the last 7 years at Adat Shalom have been incredible. I showed up and we were 135 families on the verge of closing, and now we're over 200. The budget's grown by 40%. We're a thriving synagogue with a thriving religious school, and in many qualitative and quantitative ways, we're the strongest that we've been in a long, long time.
And I say this, or ask you this question with the utmost respect to Adat Shalom, but why would you want to leave there to come here?
It's a valid question. So I'll give you two reasons. The first is that the rabbinate is a profession about tradition. When you have the opportunity to follow in the tradition of Rabbi Schulweis and Rabbi Feinstein, you grab it. To think of that Mount Rushmore that is going to be built in the valley here. From what I understand, that house next to the synagogue is going to be torn down. A little Mount Rushmore is going to be built with their faces. To think that my name or my face could be associated with theirs is incredible kavod. It's incredible honor. And it's humbling. The second thing is, I think I've done all that I can do at Adat Shalom, and I think I'm ready for the next challenge in my career. And I think I'm ready for my forever shul. I think I'm ready to walk into an office and say, this is where I'm going to sit for the next 25 years. And putting down those kinds of roots and doing it especially here in Los Angeles, where my entire family is an incredible opportunity as well.
Obviously, you've referred to Rabbi Schulweis, and we're as fortunate as anybody to have his memory here and his teachings. And now we're fortunate to have Rabbi Feinstein, and he's going to be here for many years to come. How do you incorporate what they've taught and what Rabbi Feinstein is teaching to the future of this community?
So, before Rabbi Schulweis, there was another rabbi. I don't know who there was, because his name is not on any of the rooms of this building. But there was somebody here in the valley who was a rabbi, and Rabbi Schulweis was not like him. And Rabbi Feinstein, who's an incredible orator, teacher, thinker, is not exactly like Rabbi Schulweis. He brought his own wrinkle to the community. And I hope that in many ways, people would think of me as a great speaker and a great thinker, and they'd think of me as different. Because I think that what synagogue life calls for today is different than what it called for when Rabbi Feinstein started and when Rabbi Schulweis started. And I think that all of it can be successful and different.
As you know, and as Blair has heard, we have tremendous schools. Our early childhood center has the highest enrollment it's ever had at 220 kids. Our day school is thriving at 240-ish kids. Our Hebrew school has 150, 160 kids. Unfortunately, we're a product of the world we're living in, and we're having a very difficult time, although better, incorporating those families into more than just the transaction of their child's school. Now, for those of you that don't know, you come here on Tot Shabbat, there's over 225 people on the sports field. The other night in Purim, we were lucky enough to come for the little kids. There were 300 people. So they're starting to, but we need to do a better job of keeping them here and keeping them connected to more than their teachers and the principals and the educators. How do you propose that we do that?
The key to retention is relationships. Nobody is tied to a school. We're tied to people. Nobody is tied to a synagogue building. We're tied to people. So nobody can be expected to have loyalty, and I'm from Chicago and I believe in loyalty. Nobody is expected to have loyalty to an address. And that means that those families in Tot Shabbat are going to only transition into the sanctuary, whether it be here or the room next door, after they build relationships with the people who lead the services in these rooms, after they build relationships with the people who sit in the seats in the pews during the services in these rooms, after they make friends and aspire to be part of this community, just like they aspire to be part of that community, which is why they're there. And retention is the challenge today, but it's been, Moses and Aaron stood around the Mishkan and said, why don't kids come to services? This is a challenge that has always existed, and the answer has always been the same. Nobody has ever picked Valley Beth Shalom because it's a conservative synagogue. They pick the synagogue because of the rabbi, because of location, because when they walk in, they see a community of people that they want to be a part of. They imagine raising their kids alongside those kids. They think that this group of people is the people that they'd like to spend the next 25 years of their life with. When we can check those 3 boxes, we'll have won the All Valley tournament, right? We'll have cemented our place and once again retained all those families.
We hear about meeting Jews where they are. What does that mean to you?
So, like I said in the sermon, in a literal sense, it means today Jews don't necessarily come to Shul. Right? So at Adat Shalom, we have members that live in Palm Springs that have come to Shul once, but they find value in the programming or in watching high holiday services or in whatever it is that we're producing. They want to support it. We have to think as a community of people who are inside the campus and people who are outside the campus. So meeting Jews where they are today has become a physical, literal mission or a charge in addition to the metaphoric one that existed many years ago, which is that all of us, every single person in this room, is on a different journey in their Jewish life. We're on a different journey in life. So of course we're in a different journey in our Jewish life. And we have to appeal to all of you, and we have to create leaders in the community that can help facilitate those conversations in your living room, those meaningful Havdalah ceremonies in your backyard, those Kabbalat Shabbat moments at the Shabbaton at Brandeis Bardeen or at Camp Ramah that you and your kids will never forget. If you think about the slideshow at your kids' B'nai Mitzvah, those pictures did not happen by accident. Those pictures were a result of very intentional decisions that you made. Where to send them to camp, where to go to school, what vacations to take, how you were going to stand in front of the, name the spot. And we as an organization, as a synagogue, as an institution, need to be very intentional about providing moments for the slideshow in your soul. Because you will look back on your time and you will look back on these moments, on standing arm in arm with people in the community during Havdalah, of dancing together, of cooking together, laughing together. And the leadership of this institution needs to think about how we're going to create that slideshow for all of us.
In your speech, drash, sermon, whatever you want to call it, you talked about your passion for Israel from your early childhood to recently when you were there and still today. What role should Israel and Zionism play in synagogue life?
I think it's essential in synagogue life. It's already essential. I mean, there's an Israeli flag right behind you on the bima, right? So it's as essential as this flag sitting behind me because they share the same position on the bima. I didn't put those flags there, by the way, just for this talk, right? The record should show I walked in and those flags were already there. And if you visit synagogues around the country, you will find both of those flags on the bima on either side, flanking the most sacred object that we have in our tradition. So it already embodies an essential position as part of synagogue life. If you're trying to ask me, does it also divide synagogue communities? I think if allowed to be discussed in the wrong context, if allowed to, it could also divide synagogue life. And I've seen it happen at Adat Shalom as well, and it's not supposed to be that. It didn't used to be that. God willing, it's not going to be that soon again. And I think that it begins with communities like this one choosing to support organizations in Israel that are not necessarily only AIPAC or J Street. That is not the only choice of how we support Israel in 2022. We actually have the opportunity to support Israeli organizations in Israel that affect our brothers and sisters living in Eretz HaKodesh, in our Holy Land. And we do that as a community by doing everything that you know so well, by setting up a committee, by people doing research on which organizations this community would like to adopt, by building a relationship with them, and by moving forward and establishing year after year after year. Wouldn't it be an amazing thing on our website? In 10 years, if you went on our website and you saw 5 different organizations that now bear the name of Valley Beth Shalom on its wall in Israel, that we would visit on our trips there. And we would express our pride in what we had done, not only here in Los Angeles, but also there. I think that would be an incredible accomplishment.
2 more questions.
Sure.
How should our synagogue use social media in the present and the future? And what experience do you have in implementing those visions?
I think we should use social media in the present and the future.
Thank you for that. We'll go on to the next one.
And I think we should use it as a tool, just like the telephone was a tool, and at one point the billboard was a tool. And we should employ every tool that we can to allow for the Torah of this community to transcend the walls of this campus. That means YouTube videos. That means Facebook. That means Twitter. That means VBS TV. That means looking at all of the different avenues that this community has already begun to explore and say which is the most effective, what pays the best returns for us, and how do we reach the most people. And if we survey the community, what do people actually use? And we might use that information to say, well, everybody uses Facebook, so we should use Facebook, or we might use that information to say, everybody uses Facebook, so we should use Facebook and something else to see if it brings in new people. Because there's no right answer, but we know that all of us check it on our phone 10,000 times a day. I would want the messages of this place wherever people check 10,000 times a day.
Okay, my last question is an issue facing virtually every facet of Jewish life in America and everywhere outside of Israel.
Good coffee.
No. I don't drink coffee, so I don't know. It's interfaith families. And what do we as a synagogue, what is your position on that? And how do we bridge the gap of a lot of conflict?
Right. I feel like I've said this a bunch, so please forgive me to anybody who's heard me say this.
And you'll have it more tomorrow, I'm sure.
Right. I think that a lot of synagogues look at this issue and think that the answer is policy. I don't think that the answer is entirely policy. I think a lot of it is personality. So, just to give you an idea, for the last 6 years, I've taught the Introduction to Judaism class at American Jewish University for the cohort, and I have been involved in educating and having the honor of walking candidates through the conversion process. I usually sponsor 5 or 6 candidates each spring, walking them into the mikveh and the Beit Din and then mikveh. And I never thought that this would be part of my rabbinate that I was so proud of. As a kid, if somebody had told me that people convert to Judaism, I would have asked why. Why would anybody? Judaism is my family. Like, somebody would want to join my family? Like, you know, my family is lovely. Believe me, you'll meet them. They'll be sitting here every single Shabbos. But this is our family. This is like our shtick. And I don't know that there's anything more inspiring than somebody coming out of the sacred waters of the mikveh, and I say to them, welcome home to the Jewish people. It was many years ago that Rabbi Chuck Simon, who was the head of Federation of Jewish Men's Club at the time, he sent out a report that talked about how the reason that most people don't convert to Judaism is that they're never asked. And the reason that Jewish machatenim, parents don't ask their future in-law is because of the perception that it's going to be, God bless you, pushy, right? And we have high expectations, God bless you, and that is already a perception of Jewish people that we don't want to lay on this new person to our family at the outset. But I have to tell you that 3 times in my career, families at Adat Shalom have told me that there's a situation in their family, and I have welcomed the couple into my office, and that meeting about how they met and what their plans are for the future has involved an ask for the non-Jewish partner to begin the class at American Jewish University. And 2 out of the 3 times, the partner has begun the class and ended up converting. And the one time, he, and statistically speaking, men are far less likely to convert to Judaism than women because there's an extra added step in the conversion that makes men a little bit uncomfortable to think about. That time that he told me that he had no interest, they still asked me to do the wedding, and I still said no, as I would still say no because I feel like I have no authority actually to officiate that wedding. And I still had an opportunity to welcome them to Adat Shalom for high holidays, services, things like that, because I feel like we talked about it as 2 mensches would. Not being a jerk about interfaith realities is a major hurdle for the Jewish community today. And even if we drafted the most inclusive, accepting policy in the world, that policy means nothing if the interfaith couple shows up at the doors of this sanctuary and they're greeted by somebody who is not in keeping with the personality of that policy. It is in the execution of welcoming that allows us to signal to today's reality that we are a place where couples can undergo that journey here at Valley Beth Shalom. That you should not be afraid to walk into this building and ask for a meeting with the rabbi to talk about all kinds of different issues with conversion, to talk about all kinds of issues of intermarriage. And I'm happy to have that in an honest and transparent and authentic manner at any time. And I feel like if that's the tenor of by which the conversation begins, by which the relationship begins, I think that it's actually been honored on both sides in my experience.
Thank you for a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. There is dessert behind everybody, and I know Rabbi will be staying for a little while to answer questions. He's had a very long day here, and tomorrow will be just as long, but we really do want to thank you for your time and your knowledge. And
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.